All right, we are back with Monday's edition of Seminoles Sidelines, and there are three things that let me know college football season is back. One, SEC Media Days. Two, ACC Media Days. And three, former FSU offensive lineman and Osceola football analyst Mark Salva is back on the show. Mark, welcome back. It's football season, man.
Where am I? What is this place?
Well, it's been a while since you've been on the show. You and I have certainly spent some time talking over the off season, but first, how is everything in Nashville? And how much golf have you played this year? And
well, Nashville's rocking as usual. There's always something happening here. It's great. I try to avoid downtown as much as possible. The golf question is yes.
What is the handicap these days?
My putting. Usually,
yeah, like everybody.
Right.
All right. Well, yeah. Well, listen. First of all, we're glad to have you back. I don't know about you, but when this is the fastest off season I can remember, when I was not directly involved with the football program. You know, when you're involved with the football program, because the calendar is so busy, even the summers go by quick. When you're not involved in football, sometimes it seems like there's the 9 months between the national championship game and opening week of the following next season take forever. Obviously, as you and I were talking about before we started with the recruiting calendar this year, it certainly seems like there's been almost no time between the Oklahoma Bowl game for Florida State and the opening of fall camp, which is about 2.5 weeks away. First week in August, the team will report. Anyway, has it been a slow off season for you? I mean, does it seem like it's?
Well, I got plenty to do.
Yeah.
Make no mistake. So I mean, it goes by, and recruiting for me, I probably don't pay as close as attention as you do. Obviously, I mean, these summer official visits have just ramped up the intensity in off-season recruiting, in the sense of urgency that it is because of the early signing period, right? And so, I mean, there's like no break, and the same as always was that recruiting's like shaving, right? You miss a few days, you start to look a little ratty, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that is no more true now it's more true now than it's ever been because of the recruiting calendar the way it is. And I'll say I'm glad I don't coach anymore the way this recruiting calendar is. I don't know how those guys do it. Honestly.
Yeah. And listen, I think the staff for Florida State reports back to work this week. I think they have their what we used to call a hideaway this week. So you and I are going to talk a little bit about that. But the reason we actually brought you on was for recruiting. And the main reason for that is because Florida State got commitments from offensive lineman Hylton and Jonathan Daniels on Thursday and Friday of last week. And, of course, there's probably no one better associated with the Osceola to talk about offensive linemen than you, Mark. You played at Florida State, started on the offensive line, then obviously spent time at Florida State on staff. And for our subscribers, listeners, viewers who don't know, Mark was also offensive line coach at the University of South Carolina for 5 years. And before he went into private practice, but still, you've been training offensive linemen. So when we started talking about Seminole Sidelines for this week, it made perfect sense to bring you on, get you back in the groove, so to speak, particularly so that we could get your opinions about Jonathan Daniels and Hylton. Obviously, you and I have both watched their film, both impressive, but and I had my chance to talk about both of the kids last week, even though I did go back and watch Jonathan's tape again this morning. And we'll start with him because he was the first kid that committed to Florida State as an offensive lineman for 2024, and they beat some impressive programs out for him. Georgia was in there, LSU, Kentucky, among others. And, listen, there was some concern after losing Jason Zandamela to USC, Manassi Atiti to USC, Derek Plaz to Miami. What was going on with the offensive line class at FSU from a high school standpoint? They seem to have answered those questions emphatically, that they were still in business. They were still getting who they wanted. And so just talk a little bit about your takeaways on Jonathan.
Yeah. Let me preface it by saying this. We're going off of highlight clips off a junior tape, right? And we just finished talking about the recruiting calendar. in that recruiting calendar, there are numerous official visits, camps, workouts. I mean, there's all kinds of things that go into evaluating players beyond just what you see on the tape. So, my comments here are strictly based on about 15 highlight clips from a junior tape, right? And those are my impressions. So by no means do I have a strong opinion about what kind of kid they are, what their work ethic is, how they fit in the program, any of those kinds of intangibles that go into whether or not a kid is a match for your program or not, right? So let me start off by saying that. So Jonathan Daniels, the tape says 6'5", 290. I think his arms are probably 6'5".
Yep.
His legs. I mean, he's a long dude. He's got long limbs. And it's funny. Although he may not have elite size, I think back to like Jamie Dukes, right?
Yep.
If you're going to build a perfect center or a perfect line, it is Jamie Dukes. He was 6 foot barely, if he was, but he had the arms of a 6'7" guy. He was 300 pounds. And until McDuffie got a hold of him, then they made him get down to about 285, 290, right?
Yep.
And he had machine gun feet. His feet were he had skinny legs and skinny ankles, and he could really move his feet. So he was short that he had leverage, but he had long enough limbs and arms and explosiveness and athletic ability that he'd get under guys and transfer that weight and make it. That's what made Jamie so great, was that he had those long arms. And so when I look at Jonathan Daniels, I kind of think of the same thing. He is very athletic. He can bend. He's got long arms, and he's really athletic. I mean, he's got a lot of tools to work with. I think the thing that I see in him is, and this goes with Ty Hylton too. These guys are not even close to ready to go. They based on the little bit I saw. Is these guys have a lot of tools to work with. And it's funny because I look at both these guys and it just strikes me that Alex Atkins obviously has a type.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I know you like blondes, right? I'm kind of partial to whatever my wife is at the time, but yeah, it's
please don't let her hear this.
I know, no, she's not going to get her if she can't hear it. And she doesn't watch these either. So
yeah.
Be that as it may, right? Alex Atkins has a type, and he likes long, athletic guys who are lean. Neither of these guys look very fat at all.
No,
they look like they're very lean guys in shape. And so I would say if there's one thing I would have to pick at is that you don't see a lot of explosiveness, right? And so for me, it all depends on how you weigh certain abilities and certain characteristics, right? I'll tell you what he does do is he sticks on blocks. Once he gets into a guy, he maintains contact, and that takes a lot of athletic ability. And so, when a guy tries to throw him off, when you say a guy can bend, most people think, well, he can get in the stance, right? Well, I think what we see when I say a guy can bend, I see a guy that's blocking a guy, and a defensive lineman is trying to wrench him off and throw him off, and he gets bent kind of sideways and all that, but he doesn't lose his balance. His feet keep moving. He maintains his base, and he maintains contact, even though guys they're getting wrenched all over the place. I mean, meaning that they can bend and still keep their balance, and even getting compromising positions. Trying to navigate through traffic and that kind of thing. And I see this guy has that ability to do that. He can bend, and he can get on a block, and he can stick on guys and apply his foot pressure pretty consistently. I really didn't see him go against a lot of great competition. I'll say that. I'm looking at the guy, on the highlight tapes, you're looking at the guys he's blocking. I'm not seeing a lot of, 6'5", 290 pound guys like he's going to have to block.
No.
So how is he, and so that goes back to, okay, let's go back further in the evaluation process. What were his results in camps when he did go against those guys? Must have been pretty good, or else he wouldn't be as highly thought of. So I'm going to assume that he can hold his own in that regard. But when you put the pads on and you got to come off the ball and knock somebody off the football, I don't see that explosion as much. Speed off the ball. But the way guys block these days, that's not a huge priority for a lot of people. It's like, can I get on a guy? Can I stick? Can I pull across the formation, navigate traffic, turn up in the hole, and get on somebody and stay on them? And I think he can do that.
Now, do you think some of those deficiencies, and it's really not a deficiency, it's probably not the right word to use, but you think something with a kid that is that big growing into his body, you think it takes them a little bit longer to become more explosive through the legs and through the hips because they have probably not been in a true, high school.
About nature or nurture?
Yeah.
Well, I think you can improve from a baseline to a certain extent, but some guys are just natural explosive guys.
Right.
I mean, I'll throw a name at you. You probably heard of one. Remember Chad Bates?
Yeah.
Yeah, from South Carolina. When we signed Chad Bates in I guess it was probably 1993, too, somewhere in there. I remember watching. They actually filmed him hitting the sled, and you saw his explosiveness. I mean, he broke the sled. He came out of his hips, and he was so explosive. And there are certain guys like that they just naturally, when they come off the ball, they really can short step it, and they have that ability to just pop their hips right before contact and generate a lot of hat speed and knock guys off the ball. Great linebackers have that ability. Marvin Jones had that ability in droves, right? He just step on a guy's toes and just explode a short pop, and guys go flying. An offensive lineman, that's something that if an offensive lineman has that naturally, it's a great tool to have. I'll tell you who else is pretty good at that, and that's our right guard. His name is
Emmanuel.
Dimitri Emmanuel has that short little hip pop that knocks guys off the ball, right? I don't see that with these guys.
The thing that's funny you say that. Emmanuel and Chad's a little bit taller than Dimitri, but they're both built alike. They're both thick kids.
Yeah.
Shorter than they obviously didn't have the length that a Daniels or let's talk about let's talk about some of the kids we know about, Bless Harris, Jeremiah Byers, those type of kids.
Right. Well, and so I tell you who else, Daniels, he kind of reminds me physically of Maurice Smith a little bit. He's long, athletic, sits in his hips well. I could see him getting a spot at center even.
Now they have talked to Hylton about we talked to Hylton after his official visit. He did mention that they've talked to him about center. I think Hylton. I don't think he's got as long arms as Jonathan, but Daniels. I do think I think he might be a little bit taller than Daniels. But I tell you what, you talk about Daniels' athleticism. The one thing that stuck out to me, and it's highlight tape, right? And I had this conversation with one of the other recruiting service guys while we're sitting around talking official visits, talking about how to make evaluations off of watching highlight tape. And so my thing to him was when I watch highlight tape, I try to watch what I don't see, right?
Right.
I mean, as opposed to what I do see, because they should be good plays on a highlight tape. Even though I still get pissed when I see a receiver or running back post a great catch or a great run that's followed with a fumble. Like, I mean, why are you putting that on your house? But anyway, I digress. But anyway, so one of the things I noticed, you mentioned his athleticism. The one thing I did notice is when he is working a double team up to the second level, despite the fact that he's so much bigger than everybody, he's pretty good at being able to lock on to the guy at the second level, which is usually a kid that's much smaller than he is and much quicker, theoretically much quicker. So that was, and of course, then you watch him on defense and you realize that he is pretty athletic, and you do see he runs pretty well. And yeah, I agree. I think both of these guys, and I said it the other day, I think both these guys could probably play anyway. If you're looking at a guy at center and at tackle, probably the two hardest left tackle anyway, probably the two hardest positions on the offensive line to play, in my opinion, probably because I played center. Probably a little biased there, but I think that obviously if you could play center and tackle, obviously, Mark, I think it's not a stretch to say you can play any position on the offensive line.
Well, I'll qualify with this, especially the way offenses are now. Guards are your big, thick maulers, right?
Yep.
And I don't see either one of these guys, because everything I said about Daniels pretty much transfers to Hylton too. Hylton might just not be quite as fluid, maybe. He's as raw can be. But neither one of these guys have great pop off the ball. They don't have great acceleration. I imagine doing board drills. These guys, first time they're going to do board drills, they're going to struggle.
Oh yeah.
so that you want that that Landon Dickerson type, the Dimitri Emmanuel, the Dylan Gibbons. You want that big mauler in there for those 2 and 3 techniques, to move them, double team them, create space in the middle of the defense. And I don't see either one of those guys necessarily being that guy right now at this point in time.
Yep. Well, listen, and the question on Hylton all along was, could he get big enough, right? I mean, he was 240 about this time last year. Has gained almost 40 pounds. He's at 280, lifted at 280. A guy that looks like he could probably carry 300 pounds. I don't know if you want to get much bigger than 300. The average offensive tackle in the NFL, I believe, this year is 313. So really, once you get around that 300 mark, you're big enough. You guess that's more about strength and, as you said, explosion. But yeah, listen, I think both kids are outstanding prospects, and it's going to be interesting to see how they, as you said, develop once they get here. And we see it all the time. They're the hardest 2 positions to recruit to as far as trying to translate from high school to college, or offensive and defensive linemen. So
yeah, the things you can't improve on. Let's talk about that, right? They can run. Both of them can run pretty good. I can see them pulling across the formation. We like to run those screens. We like to run those counters with those guys. They can run and turn and turn up into a hole. Both those guys can do that. That's you can work with that, right? That's something that is that's uncommon. So that's a plus for both these guys. Like I said, they stick on blocks. Sometimes the caveat to a guy that has a lot of hat speed coming off the ball is he hits a guy and then he doesn't stick, and the guy bounces off, makes a play for 1 yard gain instead of a 1 yard loss, right? So guys that don't stick on blocks, these guys both stick on blocks. I mean, I'm really nitpicking here when I say that's the thing. And you can improve that. You can improve that with technique. You can improve that with strength training, strengthening your core and all that stuff, explosion, all that stuff can be trained. But the things that they have in abundance.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, all right, they picked up one more commitment on Saturday. I just want to I don't know if you had a chance to watch Micaiah Danzy. Just how do you see him fitting into Florida State's offense? Again, he's going to probably have some transition. He's very fast, but he's probably got to get a little bit stronger, a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
He plays at a smaller high school, 2A. But, to me, he kind of reminds me a little bit of Lawrence Toafili. Who does he remind you of?
Yeah, I was trying to think about who does he remind me of. I told Philly's as good as any. He's a long strider.
Yep.
Right. And he's not, his long speed is not elite, but his acceleration is pretty good. To me, if I'm running an outside zone or a bubble screen, flare screen,
yep,
or something like that, or even a counter where the end sinks down, you got to log him. Now you got to outrun the angle of the linebacker going over the top. His burst is really, really good. And there's a couple of pictures of him on an option and in some outside zone plays where he's taking it wide. He sticks his foot in the ground and he's like a shot out of a cannon. So his acceleration in 10 yards is really, really good. And he's stronger than you think. I saw him run out of a lot of arm tackles. He's deceptively strong, hard runner. So yeah, guy's got a lot of tools to work with. I saw, he caught a nice screen in traffic, turned up and scored a touchdown, so there was a lot of bodies around him, made the catch, no problem. So it looks like he has pretty decent hands. And he's shifty. He got those swivel hips, and I was trying to think, who do I know that had, I'll tell you, and not that he's going to be this, but he reminds me of Greg Allen a little bit.
Okay. Right.
He reminds me, I'd be curious to see what like older guys think about that. Jerry and some of these other guys that know Greg Allen. He was one of our greatest tailbacks we've ever had, and he reminds me a little bit of Greg with that.
Yeah, Greg Allen kind of gets lost in all the modern names,
Yeah, well, recency bias.
Yeah, like Dalvin Cooks and all those. All right, well, listen, we're almost a football season. Florida State is getting ready to start their coaches' meetings. They do a thing similar to what Coach Bowden used to call hideaway and Coach Scott called hideaway at South Carolina. It's and I think some of our subscribers and listeners and viewers have probably heard me and you talk about this before. But for those that don't, kind of tell us what these meetings that Mike Norvell will have. I think last year, if I recall correctly, he took the staff to a farm up in South Georgia, and they met for about 2 days, and they spend the night, and they cook out, and they do things like that. Ours were never overnighters at South Carolina.
They used to be. Coach Bowden used to do it that way. He used to take them out
Coach Bowden did. Yep.
He used to take them out to a farm, and they'd meet on a porch. And you can get with Coach Gladden and those guys about this. I've heard these stories. I've never been in this one, but there'd be like a tin roof, and it'd rain, and there'd be, the tin roof would be making all this noise. Coach Bowden would be without his shirt on and smoking a cigar, having a cigar in his mouth, holding court on the front porch out in the heat. I mean, I've heard all kinds of stories about the hideaway in the early days.
Well, yeah. And listen, I can remember the only thing I remember really. I remember when y'all were at Florida State. Of course, I was not there. I was a student there, but I remember y'all. When by the time you guys got ready to leave Florida State to go to South Carolina, y'all had them up in the press box.
Yeah, we had the sky boxes, the old sky boxes.
Then by the time I got to South Carolina as a GA, I don't know whether you guys ever went to Fripp or wherever to have them, but y'all, the 3 years I was at South Carolina, we did them in the press box there as well.
Yeah.
But kind of just tell what those just kind of give people some insight as what those meetings are like, why the head coach has them, and the massive amount of detail that goes into these things.
Yeah, a lot of preparation. So it's just what it sounds like. It's hideaway. It's get away from everything. Get away from the phone. Get away from the secretaries. Get away from people walking in the office. Get away from no appointments. You are committed for these 2-3 days to do nothing but go through your program. And, all the coaches, staff are there. The head coach runs it. And it's just for him to say, okay, number one, set the tone of the program. This is what we're about. Just going over all these things. This is what we're about. These are the goals. These are, this is where we are. This is how we do things, you hit every minute detail in the program, and then you have, so you go through personnel, you go through recruiting, you go through a little bit of X's and O's, not a lot, but a little bit, in offense and defense together. So we say, hey, what do you guys see? What do you guys do? Do we need this? How do we do? And the big thing is personnel. And then you talk about every aspect of the program, right? And so you'll have a guest speaker come in. You'll have whoever's in charge of the dining hall come in. This is our plan for the dining hall. This is, what camp's going to look like. Everything is planned out to the nth degree. And anybody that touches the program, anybody that touches the players comes in and presents and says, this is how we're going to handle academics, the dining hall, the dorm, I'm sure, everything, anybody that touches the player comes in and says, and has a part in the program, comes in and lays out what the plan is moving forward, and then they'll ask questions, critique, make suggestions, et cetera, et cetera. And so when you come out of those meetings and the camp starts, everybody knows exactly what's getting ready to happen, right? Everything to the nth degree. And training camp is planned to the nth degree, to the minute.
Yep.
Right. And it's really all encompassing, inclusive. And the biggest part is that, I remember Coach Bowden used to do this. He would have pages of notes and just numbered 1 through however many hundred he'd have. And sometimes they were just statements,
Yep.
And the number one note was always, you get what you demand. He said, men, you get what you demand. And that set the tone for his coaches. In other words, and then he may comment on it. Sometimes he commented on it, sometimes he wouldn't, but like he'd say, okay, you get what you demand. So this, make sure you're demanding the right things, if the kid doesn't do it, you didn't demand it, right? That kind of thing. So setting the culture of what the expectation is. So yeah, it's a pretty intense deal, and it also signals the beginning of we're getting ready to go to work.
Yeah, I remember at South Carolina, we always did the media golf outing. Remember, we do that. Then the very next day would be the start of hideaway, and I can still remember my first year at South Carolina, we had the media day, and they served barbecue and potato salad. And it's out at the New Carolina Country Club at that time.
Yeah.
And I got food poisoning. went through my first hideaway in college football with food poisoning. So I'll never forget hideaway as long as I live.
Well,
thank God
yeah,
Coach Scott let me go into the coach's locker room and lay down on one of those makeshift cots that they had.
The beds we had.
That they had down there. So
I remember one time we had a note. I don't know if I can't remember. I think it was South Carolina. Yeah, it was, because Ricky Bustle was our offensive coordinator at the time.
Yep.
And one of the notes that Brad had was, and Steve Taneyhill was our quarterback. He goes, do we need protective boots for Steve? Thinking about, Waggles pulling the guard on the perimeter when we, and Ricky looks at him and goes, Coach, I'm not sure. I mean, does he have a problem with his toes or something? I mean, do we need, or are you talking about getting him steel-toed cleats? And everybody kind of looked at him and then started laughing when he realized he's thinking he needed protective boots like shoes.
Yeah.
When he realized when we were talking, it's just a funny moment. But,
I always wonder if Coach Bustle had stayed, if things might have worked out a little bit longer at South Carolina.
Yeah,
that's
Ricky was a good dude.
I like old Coach Bustle. I think he went back to Virginia Tech, right? Went back to work for Beamer and got those guys back on track. He ended up, I think he ended up coaching Vic, right? I mean, he was Vic's
coach.
OC.
Because they started doing a lot of the stuff. We showed him all the FSU stuff with Charlie Ward. He got all that stuff, went back to Virginia Tech, put it in with Vic. Right?
Hey, speaking of football makes a small world, I'm sitting out at one of FSU's football camps about a month ago. I guess it's about a month ago. Yeah, they did them all in June. And this kid named Anthony Wright Jr. is one of the quarterbacks. And so one of the coaches walks up and goes, that's Anthony Wright from South Carolina over there. And of course, for you guys that don't know, Anthony Wright was a quarterback at South Carolina that went on to play 10 years in the NFL, started for the Cowboys, Ravens, among others.
We recruited him.
Yeah. So anyway, I got to run into Anthony. So it was kind of, the football makes for a small world. And of course, the fact that he's got a son getting ready to go to college makes me feel extremely, extremely old. But anyway, football makes for a small world. All right. So we've talked a little bit about hideaway. Now I want to talk to you. Listen, I've been doing some research with some other teams for some message board posts and that kind of thing. And one of the things when I've gone through this thing that I've had to start doing, which is I've not done in years past, is how many, who they get in from the portal. Where are they going to be better at than they were? Where are they trying to fill holes? And so I want to ask you this question. Obviously, Florida State brought in another batch of transfer portal guys this year, before spring, after spring. So I wrote 4 guys down that really stuck out to me as guys that have a chance. All 4 of them have a chance to have a significant impact on FSU season. But if I gave you Ventrell Cypress at quarterback, Daryl Jackson at defensive tackle, Keon Coleman at wide receiver, and Jeremiah Byers at offensive tackle, which of those 4 guys do you think has a chance to have the biggest impact on Florida State's 2023 season?
Who will or who has a chance? Well, let's see.
Who will? Let's go with who will. Well, now let's go with who do you think has a chance? Because
here's my thought on these 4 guys. Okay, I'm not worried about our offense scoring points.
Right.
Regardless of whether Keon Coleman or Jeremiah Byers are in this lineup, we're going to score points.
I agree.
And so now it becomes, can we stop anybody? Which we can, but can we make the big stops? And do we have playmakers on defense? Right. Jared Verse is a playmaker on defense, all established. Kalen DeLoach has been a playmaker for us on defense. Cheyenne Brown has made some big plays on defense, but do we have difference makers and playmakers on defense? And so for me, hopeful that Cypress and Daryl Jackson can be 2 guys that can make big plays, big stops, big interceptions, big tackles on defense that are difference-making plays for us to win ball games. So if we're going to get to where we hope to get to, those 2 guys have to be performers, because number one, we don't have a lot of depth at those positions. We got plenty of depth at wide receiver, and honestly, I can't believe I'm saying this. We have depth on offensive line.
Yeah.
And so but at those 2 positions, we need those guys to be elite players, or it's really good players. So that's That's my take on that.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. I think that if Keon was not here, you're still excited about the Florida State offense. If Jeremiah's not here, you're still excited about the possibility of Florida State having one of the best offenses in the ACC. Now, I think they're just that much better because those guys are here.
Oh, no question. Not to minimize the impact they're going to have for sure. I mean, yeah.
I think there's more questions on the defensive side of the ball. I keep on going back and forth because if Fitzgerald can turn into that lockdown corner and stay healthy, it gives Adam Fuller some options to possibly cross-train some guys at safety where they're not particularly deep. You've got right now, based on my two deep, you've got a true freshman at one safety, backing up at one safety, and possibly a redshirt freshman, Ashley Barker, backing up at the other. And then, of course, you look at Daryl Jackson. I think that you got, and we haven't even talked about the Fisk kid who did not go through spring. But I think I go back and forth because I really think it's important that the tackles be successful defensively to allow the linebackers to run and hopefully keep, the linebackers healthy to allow. I mean, listen, it's not like protecting the quarterback. The linebacker is going to take hits no matter what. But
one of those hideaway notes Coach Bowden always used to have, it was probably note number 46, maybe. The team with the best defensive tackles usually wins.
Yeah. But if
so the more depth we can get there, the better we're going to be.
Yeah, I think that he, along with Fabian and Josh Farmer and Fifth, I think they give Florida State a chance to be as good as anybody in America at defensive tackle if they all play up to their potential, and all of them have potential. Of course, listen, they may be able to play these guys out. We haven't even talked about Dennis Briggs, right? I mean, so they look to be 5 deep on the defensive line, and Daryl Jackson quite possibly might be the best of the bunch. So,
right.
And listen, I think he's helped make Fabian a better. Now, I think there were 2 parts. Fabian had never been completely healthy until this spring, right? This is the first time and you saw a difference in the way Fabian was able to play. Now, was that health? Probably, part of it at least. And another part of it is he's forcing those other guys to get better, right? Those iron sharpens iron. We talk about it all the time.
Oh yeah, competition. The more competition you have at positions, the better you're going to be. I mean, we know that from our own experience in the history of our program. I mean, that's why. And you look at the ones that are elite now, they keep recruiting elite players, and that competition just breeds excellence, right?
Yep.
And so you are fighting for your job every day, and that's the kind of atmosphere and culture you want in a program, because that only makes you better. It's easy to say, yeah, if you get 1% better every day, 100 days you'll be 100% better, whatever, and that's all good. But when you look behind you and you don't have anybody really pushing you, you think you're trying, but you don't know. But when your job is on the line, you find an extra gear. I promise you.
Yep. Yeah, listen, I think he's probably here if he plays up to his ability, he's probably here for 1 semester or 2 semesters. He went through spring. But I do think he's got a chance to facilitate not only his own position group and make them better, but I think he's got a chance to make the defense as a whole better. So I'm going to go with Daryl Jackson. I think Fitzgerald's got a chance to be the best defensive back Florida State's had at corner in a while. We'll see how that pans out. I know they were really impressed with him in the spring. But I tend to agree with you. I think the impact, the guys that have the biggest impact are going to be on the defensive side of the ball. So,
and I mean, Coleman and Byers may be great pros. I mean, Coleman may have 10 touchdowns this year. Byers may lock down a spot, and that's fine. But the question you asked is who could have the biggest impact and have the biggest impact for the team. Those 2 defensive guys are the ones we need to actually play.
Yep, I agree. All right, now let's just move into some other. We're gonna have you back, and we're gonna talk about position previews. I want to get you and Brian Stort back on here, and we're gonna do a Seminoles Sidelines offensive line preview. Talk about all the rest of the offensive line, but I think with you, I think Byers is gonna. I think he's got a chance to be a really good player, and listen. We won't see the 2 deep until a week before the season starts, but I think he is the starting right tackle for Florida State. If you had to ask me what was going to go on. But Listen, there's been a tremendous amount of college turnover in college football, as there is each and every year. Although I think as we get into we'll talk about the coaches on the hot seat later in another program, but there are a ton of new coaches in college football, including Matt Rule at Nebraska, Luke Fickell at Wisconsin, Deion Sanders at Colorado, Hugh Freeze, Auburn, Kenny Dillingham, Arizona State, Jeff Brom, Louisville, Ryan Walters, Purdue, Zach Arnett, Mississippi State, and Lord, it just seems weird. Not the SEC media days are starting today, and no Mike Leach, man. I still can't believe that guy's gone. But Zach Arnett later took over for Coach Leach. Scott Satterfield left Louisville to go to Cincinnati. Brent Key took over as alma mater, Georgia Tech. I'm assuming he's probably might make your list because he was a former offensive lineman at Georgia Tech. And then
Right.
Troy Taylor is the new head coach at Stanford, replacing David Shaw. All right, if you had to pick two, and of course this is all reading the tea leaves because we don't ever know how they're going to do, and not all these guys will be successful. We know that. I mean, there's almost no chance that all of them are at the same school they're at now in 5 years. But if you had to pick two of those coaches or two of those hires, who would be your top two hires at those Power 5 schools?
That's a good one. That's a lot of, considering the program, the state of the programs. All right. So, I mean, each one is going to define success differently. Auburn has a different definition of success than probably Colorado does. Right. I think Deion is a great study on the current state of college football. Can the way it is right now, and him taking advantage of all the rules the way they are and turning over the roster the way he has, is that a viable path forward for sustainable success, right? And the thing about Deion is doesn't care what anybody else thinks. He's going to do what he thinks is right, and he's going to try something that some other folks probably don't have the courage to do, right? And that's kind of the way I look at what he's done. He's like, he went in there and turned over the roster, and he's ruffled some feathers. He's done some things, but they were 1 in 11 last year. What did he have to lose? He had to turn over that roster. It's going to be interesting to see that. I think they'll win more than one game next year. I don't know how many they'll win, and it's going to be interesting to see, can you build a team, with transfers and build that cohesion and that the whole team aspect of what free agency brings. You kind of lose some things there when you guys, new guys every year, every week, every whatever, right? So that to me is really interesting. Everybody's watching that to see how that turns out.
Well, that was going to be one of my questions for you down the road. I probably should have left Deion off this list because I was going to ask about him anyway. But we've had 8 months to watch what has been basically a media circus in Boulder, whether it's been some ESPN, a Fox, or even Deion's son's own media company covering the program. But listen, the rubber's getting ready to meet the road. All the creativity from the media standpoint, all the turnover the roster, all that's about, you're gonna have to put the cameras away and get the business right. It's time to figure out whether Deion can be a head coach. And no disrespect to Jackson State or the high school that he was coaching at in Texas, which I think he owned the high school. But this is different. This is a different beast. He is now playing big boy football. You mentioned you played with him. You might even been a GA before. I don't know. Y'all played together.
No, we played together. Yeah.
He has just 3 starters returning from his last year's Colorado team. Famously has brought in a lot of transfers, including his son and Travis Hunter, and signed the Kamani cornerback, McLean. But he opens up with TCU. He's got Oregon and USC in 3 of the first. He's got TCU, Oregon, and USC in 3 of the first 5 weeks of the season. Finishes with Utah, and of course he's got the Arizona States, Washington's. He's got his Pac-12 schedule, whatever that is. how do you think he's handled the transition, and how quickly do you think it will take him to be successful, if he can be successful?
Here's one thing I would bet against him. Now, again, what defines success for them? We used to say win the ones you're supposed to win, and you can pick off a few on the way, right? Which are the ones he's not supposed to win any of them. They were the worst team, one of the worst teams in college football last year, right?
Yep.
So, is it realistic they're going to beat USC, and they're going to beat Oregon? No, of course not. Utah, probably not. But with the roster, and I haven't studied the roster, so I don't know, but I would think with some of the transfers he's brought in, I know he's got some of our older guys. He's got McClendon and some of those guys, right?
Yep.
I would think, those guys were good players for us. And if the rest of those transfers were on that level or even a little better, then he's probably improved his roster. Now, can they build a cohesive units on both sides of the ball, cohesive team? I think, that's probably one Deion's strength, and the good thing he's the head coach and not necessarily the coordinator. He's got coordinators. What's his our old coordinator for defense?
I know the guy you're talking about. Was at Alabama.
Yeah.
I keep on wanting to say Jeremy Pruitt.
No, that one.
That's just because
that guy ain't coaching for a while.
That's just because I've been reading about him a lot lately. But I know exactly who you're talking about.
So all that being said, it's like I said, it's going to be interesting to see what that looks like, because he did something that everybody says, well, it took a lot of courage, in my eyes, a lot of courage to do, is to totally turn over a roster like that, because there's a lot of risk. A lot of guys just like, I want to hold on to something. What if I don't have enough guys? And of course, that's one thing we're all looking at, right? What does the roster look like? How many scholarships does he have open? And so it's going to be hard for them. So I think the way college football is now, if he's got the backing and the support of the university and the supporters, the people that are important, I think he can be relatively successful, and by that I mean have a winning record in 3-4 years.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably pretty realistic. And who knows? Maybe you knock off have a few big wins here or there. He's got some elite players. And especially those two corners are going to be elite if they're they haven't played much football yet, but they're elite talents for sure, right?
Yep.
So if you have that, you got a chance for sure. And so, yeah, we'll see.
Well, I agree with you. I think Deion's on that top new hire list. And I think, listen, and here's the reason why. Whether you're pulling for him or against him, it's going to be much watched television. Listen, I want to find out if all these transfers were the Gucci he's talking about, or are they actually Samsonites in disguise, right? I mean, he's done a lot of talking.
Look, here's what I know about Deion, and this is from personal experience. The guy, obviously very flamboyant, very charismatic, but he's also the hardest working guy I ever knew, right? The guy busted his tail. He always has, and he's very smart, right?
Oh yeah.
So I wouldn't bet against. I mean, he's trying something different.
Yep.
And I think that scares a lot of people, and it messes up the status quo. And you know what? It does. But you know what? But that's where we are in college football right now. And he's testing the limits. And so if this is the way we want it to go, with paying players and having free agency and transfers and giving all this money to coaches and players and all the money that's out there, if that toothpaste is out of the tube, that's not going back.
Yeah.
So he's taking it and running with it, and this is what we wanted as college football stewards. We let it all happen. That's fine. So let's see how it turns out. What's the limit? He's pushing the limits, and we're going to see how it turns out. It's really interesting to me. Of course, I'm rooting for him, right? I mean, he's my teammate, he's my friend. I'm rooting for him because he take it and run with it.
Yeah. I can't wait. I can't wait to see the TCU game. I can't wait to see how this pans out. I don't. Everybody thinks he's going to go somewhere really fast. I'm not sure that's the case. There's really nobody on the East Coast that's in jeopardy of losing their job and he'd have to win big at Colorado to leave after 1 year, I think. So, but anyway, it's going to be fascinating to see how he does. And listen, maybe he decides to stay if Colorado goes into the Big 12, which is what a lot of people are talking about. But yeah, I can't wait to see that one. Now, who would be your second out of that group?
I think we're all waiting to see how Hugh Freeze does at Auburn. I think that's an interesting, because it's feast or famine there, right?
Yep.
They
do not have patience.
And they do not have patience. So whatever, that's circus number 2. If Boulder is circus number 1, Auburn's probably going to be circus number 2, and that'll be a lot of fun to watch, one way or the other.
Yeah,
right?
Listen, I agree, and I hope the Yellowwood man has some burner phones available.
I mean, it's all interesting.
Ole Miss couldn't afford them.
Here's the other thing. I look at Matt Rule at Nebraska.
Yeah, that was going to be my number 2.
Well, I'm thinking, here's a guy who's been pretty successful. Baylor, right?
Yep.
Took a program.
And Temple, yeah.
In Temple. So he took some programs that were really down.
And had did not have resources like Nebraska.
Right. But the thing he's got working against him is geography. And, so being able to recruit to Nebraska, it's not like the old days, where you could sign 120 guys and, going down into Texas and California and Louisiana where they got a lot of guys, it's hard to recruit now. Recruiting for them has got to be national almost, right? And so
kind of like in Iowa. Of course, they're a little bit closer to Chicago.
But that's what I'm saying. He's got geography against him, because he's where they traditionally, when they were really good, where they got their players. There's some good programs in those vicinities now. The SEC wasn't the SEC it is now. And certainly Texas A&M and Texas weren't in it. California can still be a place for them if they're able to do it. So it'll be interesting to see, if he can attract players to Lincoln.
Well, here's the one thing that I think is different today than it was 2 years ago. These are now jobs for college football players. NIL has changed everything. And I can remember very distinctly in a press conference, possibly after he got rid of Scott Frost, Trev Albert said, resources are not an issue for us at Nebraska. And if they're willing to put that money behind an NIL program, because these kids now they're taking jobs. I mean, we can call it what we want. I know that in some states you really can't do anything on an NIL agreement until you're actually enrolled in college, if I'm thinking correctly. But I think that may be something that kind of equals the playing field. Because if I can make $150,000 playing football at Nebraska, and I'm a kid from LA, as opposed to only making $100 at UCLA or USC for whatever reason, if there's a $50,000 difference, I'm jumping on a plane, right? I mean, it's kind of the dynamic of how recruiting is done has changed.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it just kind of depends. Now, who's he going to compete against? Because everybody has resources.
Well, some have more than others, right?
Some have more than others. So is he competing against the others, or is he competing against, the Texases, the Texas A&Ms, the USCs, the SEC schools? I mean, you go fly a kid up to Lincoln, Nebraska in January, and say,
I'm sure they did a ton of business in June.
I guarantee you they did. And let me tell you something. I've been to Lincoln. You've been to Lincoln. You look around. It's pretty flat, and there ain't a lot there except corn, right? And so it'd be, like I said, it depends who they're competing against, where they get players. Now, can he make it attractive with a winning product? And that was always the great equalizer.
Right.
Is that they had a winning product. They had a culture that was attractive to a lot of guys, and they were able to, bring some of these players in, and, however else they did it. Right.
Yeah.
So,
listen, if you can win at Temple, I think you can win just about anywhere. And then he took over a dumpster fire at Baylor.
Yeah, but Temple, you know how many players are around Temple? I mean, there's a ton of players.
I mean, you're in Pennsylvania.
You know what I'm saying? You're in Pennsylvania,
football,
and
Ohio,
New Jersey.
Michigan,
New Jersey's got a lot of great players, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you only need a couple at a place like Temple, So Baylor's surrounded by players. I mean, I guess Waco's out there a little bit, but So yeah, I just think it's going to be interesting to see, can he attract players? What comes first, attracting players and getting the winning product, or having the winning product and attracting players?
Yeah.
You need a little of both,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. He's got Jeff Sims and the kid that used to be at Florida State that's related to the 49ers quarterback. I can't remember his last name. Golly. The kid, the rookie that started for 49ers this year.
Yeah, I forget his name too.
Yeah. Anyway,
I'll tell you who'd be better too is I think Georgia Tech can get a lot better. I think they'll be. I think Brent Key's going to do a good job.
Well, who I think is a good fit for his school is Jeff Bronk. I think he's got a chance to. I thought Satterfield underperformed there, and I like Scott Satterfield. I think he's a very good coach. But yeah, so all right, so we got that was a good discussion. I can't wait to see how these guys do. And listen, you're right, Freeze is going to be. He's as polarizing a figure as Jimbo, and so it's going to be fun to watch how he does and how patient the Auburn folks are with him, because Lord knows they can't fire another coach in basically less than 2 years, because they basically had fired what's his name before last season started. All right, so another hot topic in college football over the course of the last week and a half has been the situation with Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern, and obviously he was fired for allowing hazing in his program. I got a couple questions for you on that. A, were you surprised? B, thoughts on how the university handled it? And I think particularly back when you and I played, hazing in some form or fashion, either acceptable, meaning not demeaning, or unacceptable, happened. And hazing has been connected to football, fraternities, whatever, for years and years and years. And my third question, other than were you surprised and how it was handled, and I always, even when I was playing at Sanford in high school, I never quite got the hazing part of it. And now at Sanford, it was, hiding your jock strap or hiding your helmet as a freshman, and having to go ask the coach or equipment manager, "Hey, can I borrow a helmet? Mine's missing." Some of the upperclassmen took it. You're not going to find it if they don't want you to. But why in a sport where your manhood is tested almost daily, or at least it used to be, how come hazing would still be necessary in a sport like football?
Yeah, I mean, I'm no sociologist, but I imagine it has something to do with the brotherhood, right? There's a rite of passage to be admitted into the brotherhood. And that's a serious thing, for guys that have been through, a lot together. I'm not going to equate it to war. War is a totally different thing, but it is a group of guys that work hard towards a common goal and have been together for a long time. And here's some new guys coming in, and they're not going to come in and just assimilate right away. There's got to be a little bit of rite of passage. So the other thing is to be cognizant of the times that we live in, right?
Yep.
Knowing social media, cameras everywhere, nothing's swept under the rug or secret anymore. Everything is out for everybody to see, and being cognizant of that. And of course the sensibilities of communities, I'll just put it that way, especially university communities. So all that taken into account, the hazing thing has got to take, it's that rite of passage, I think somehow has to happen. I think there's, or at least it feels like it needs to happen in order for the newcomers to like I said, assimilate.
Yep.
And what form that takes obviously has to be muted compared to what it was in years past, because the standards are different.
Yeah.
And you got to be cognizant of that, and people need to be smart about that, and you need to be able to communicate to your players and your team about that. We all heard horror stories of stuff, as recent as, I guess, Northwestern, but I've heard things in high school. I remember an incident locally here not too long ago. It was really ugly. So that stuff happens, and I remember, what we would do is we would have a night during camp where all the freshmen would wear towels as diapers and have to perform a song or a skit, in front of all the coaches, and I think even some of the coaches' wives would be there. That was it. Coach Bat was up there and laughing, everybody laughed, have a good time. You watch Hard Knocks, and they make the rookies stand up and sing their fight song or sing a song or something, right? So there's some form of that somewhere along the line, and
well, I think it's different
I just think, to me, that's what it is, and now as far as the Northwestern thing, I got to admit, I haven't followed it all that closely. I just kind of read the headlines, so I don't know the details on it. But
there's just been innuendo that there are some things that could equal either sexual assault or sexual harassment because of the way the hazing's was done. Now, no one's read the report yet. The report has not been released. I think that's going to be interesting. But based on what some of these players are saying, it went from an acceptable level, as you're talking about, performing skits, which we did at Sanford, same way that y'all did it at Florida State. And then based on the two,
so it was ugly. It was the bottom line. It turned ugly, So look, and these things that happened it's just part of the part of the way that things are done in things like this. So I think, to me, you just got to be smarter. This isn't 30, 40, 50 years ago. But there's something about having to have a rite of passage, and it doesn't need to be a Lord of the Flies situation. It doesn't have to be, guys absolutely humiliated to the point where, they're harmed or they're, scarred for life. I mean, that's obviously taking it too far.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to something more positive. I did want to ask you your thoughts on that, because it has been one of the bigger stories, and now the off the field stories will take aside after these next 2 weeks of media. We'll get back to on the field stuff. Listen. Obviously, Mark, expectations are extremely high for this FSU football team. I'm hearing a lot of talk over the last 3 or 4 months from guys that I know in Tallahassee and, reading social media, where most people at Florida State think that a 10-win regular season and an appearance in the ACC championship game are a lock. Is that over the top? Is that what the expectation should be for this year? Should we maybe temper our expectations? I don't think you would water them down much more past that. But what are your and we're going to have a ton of time to talk about this over the next month and a half. But just at face value,
my initial thoughts are this: I think a realistic goal is a conference championship. I think that's a realistic goal. Yeah. I think a playoff. We don't have a playoff roster yet. I think offensively we can hang with anybody. I just think the shortcomings on defense. I think in terms of personnel and depth and that kind of thing. And you can catch anybody in a single game, but I just think over the course of a full season and then going into 2-game playoff, I just think that might be a reason. I think a conference championship is realistic. Everybody has played all the different scenarios in their head. I mean, you think we come out of September 2-2 and can still win the conference championship. I think that's a very realistic scenario. Thinking the thought being playing Clemson twice. And so that to me is probably more likely than us going undefeated the whole year. And if we did that, right, what would it take for us to get to that point? Well, we'd obviously have to come out of the gates really hot and beat those first two. Those 2 September games would have to be good wins for us. Jordan Travis. It means if we run the table or even just with one loss, it would mean Jordan Travis is out of his mind, right? It means he's healthy, and people are saying he's a Heisman. He's only a Heisman candidate if the team is in that elite level. If he carries the team to a 1-loss record, 2 loss, I don't think he wins it. 1 loss, I think he has a shot. I think he goes to New York.
I think AC, if they are in the ACC championship game, I think he's a legit candidate. If they're not in the ACC championship game, I don't think he's involved at all.
Okay.
I think
he has to win it. I think he has to win it.
Okay. All right. You think he's got to win the ACC?
Yeah, I think we got to win. I think we got to win the league with 1 loss, and that's the only way we get in the playoff too. right? I don't even know we get in a playoff with one loss, but assume we lose to LSU or Clemson, one of those, and run the table and win the league. I think we probably go to the playoff.
Well, I
right?
think you lose to LSU.
If you lose to LSU and beat
and
Clemson,
then if LSU were to go on and win the SEC, then I think you could probably get back into the playoff picture.
Yeah. So to me, those are the scenarios that, I think the realistic expectation is let's win the league first. Everybody wants to talk playoff. We hadn't even won the league since 2013, 14, whatever it was, right?
Yeah, 2014.
2014. So let's do that first, and if along the way we catch fire and things really start clicking, then we can see, where that can take us, So yeah, but a lot of things got to happen. Everything's got to fall into place. Injuries are going to play a key role, especially on defense, and then we'll see. But I'm excited about this offense for sure. I can't wait to watch it. Even if Jordan got hurt, and depending where it was in the season, I think Tate's probably good enough with the things we have around us on offense to still score points and win games.
Well, and I'm going to have a question for you. We're going to get together as a panel, and one of my questions for you guys, and I'm sure if another media organization listen to this, they will probably steal this question because there has been some of that going on. But because you're so loaded on offense, are you more aggressive this year? And because it says last year, are you more aggressive with how you use Jordan Travis than you were last year?
I think you pick your spots.
Yep.
There'll be places where you do, like against Florida, yeah, for sure. Against Miami, yeah, sure. Against Clemson, yeah, sure. But if we're handily, I can't believe I'm saying this, but if we're in the middle of our schedule, in NC State and some of these other schools, I don't think we play NC State this year, do we?
No, we do not. We're in non-divisional play for the first time.
Yeah. So yeah, be that as it may. So we're in the middle of our schedule. The Midland ACC teams. Do we need to take that risk if we're handling things okay? No, of course not. And we don't need to be. I mean, we got running backs, we got receivers, we've got offensive linemen, we got tight ends. We got all kinds of toys to play with. That he doesn't need to be the guy that's running out there dodging 10 guys to try to get in the end zone, put his head down and get his head taken off, right?
Yeah, I think there could be games where his uniform is not even dirty.
Yeah, hopefully. So we'll see how it plays out.
All right. Well, listen, we've been on here a little bit longer than I expected, but I hope everyone enjoyed it. If you're not a subscriber to the Osceola, please go to the Osceola.com or FloridaState.rivals.com. Check us out. We do have some free content. We've got a lot of great stuff on our premium recruiting board, fish bits, evaluations on the last 3 commitments are on the premium recruiting board. Obviously, now that we're in football season, Mark will be back with us pretty much on a weekly basis as we will bring back first impressions, our post-game analysis. Mark, on the weekends he's available, will be with me on post-game. We will do that right as soon as the clock hits double zeros. We will get on as quickly as we can on our YouTube channel, Twitter, and Facebook. So that's right around the corner. I think Mark's going to join us at the LSU game, correct, Mark?
I'll be there.
And, of course, the Osceola will have some special events going on around the LSU Florida State game in Orlando. As Jerry Cutts, our publisher, gets us the details, we will release those, but that'll be here quicker than any of us can think. We are 6 weeks out, I believe less than 6 weeks out from that now, but it is my favorite time of the year. We're talking football again, and we're talking football with football right around the corner as opposed to football months away. But anyway, Mark, I appreciate it, man. It's always great to see you. I know our viewers and listeners love it when you're involved with the show. They get insight that they cannot get from any other site that covers Florida State. I do not believe there's another site that has 3 former college football players offering analysis, and we appreciate you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule, but you do offer Florida State fans an insight they can't get from any other organization that covers Florida State. So we appreciate that, and we will be back Wednesday in some form or fashion, whether it's me or Aria or Bob or Kurt. We'll be back on Wednesday with more updates on what's going on with Florida State athletics, not only just football, but also I know baseball signed some new players and has players playing summer league ball in Cape Cod. And so we'll have more Florida State information coming up for you on Wednesday and Friday of this week. And thanks for joining us again on Seminoles Sidelines.